Welcome to Coinology, the podcast.
You ain't getting no money if you constantly worried about what everybody else got to say. If you constantly got your eyes on what everybody else doing, you ain't getting no money. When it comes down to closing a deal, I get it done. Every single one. I'm the certified deal closer.
Welcome to Coinology, the podcast. Hey, and welcome to another episode of Coinology. And today we're gifted to have none other than Miss J in the studio. Welcome, J.
Hello. Hi, Coinology fam.
Hey, I'm so glad to have you here.
I'm happy to be here. I'm honored to be here.
Oh, no. The honor is ours.
Yeah.
I know when I first met you and had an opportunity to talk with you and really get an opportunity to hear your story, I said, she must be a guest for season 4. And then when we had further conversations, and it was funny because it was an onboarding session.
Yeah.
And you were sharing your story there. Meanwhile, while you were talking, I'm getting text messages from Amina. She said, we got to book her. We got to book. We're talking about something else totally, but your story is one that I feel that the world needs to hear.
Yeah.
Folks need to know who Jay is, right?
Thank you.
Jay.
That's me.
You just released a new project.
Yes, I did.
So by the time this airs, this will not be a new project anymore, but tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, I released a song called 555. I released it originally back at the beginning of this year. And it did really, really well. I did it with a distribution company called CWE.
Okay.
And I wrote this song because I kept seeing the numbers 555 everywhere right before I was about to go through, and we'll talk about it more, I'm sure. One of the most devastating times of my life. I wrote this song, and I didn't want it to be sad. You know, even though it was really a transitional season of my life. And being a Christian, a lot of times we over spiritualize things and we start seeing numbers, and then people say like, oh, that's demonic, or don't talk about that. But I'm like, no, God was literally warning me that something was about to happen. So I went to my pastors, I went to my counselors, my therapists. I'm like, what does this mean? Because I was seeing it all the time. I would wake up at 5:55 in the morning, my stomach would start growling at 5:55 in the evening, and I'm looking at the clock, I'm like, it's 5:55. Go to the grocery store. Grocery bill, $55.50. It's like,
even on the project that you and I both were working on, we were having a full conversation. I came up with this concept.
Yeah.
I named it Project 555, and then we got off the call. You said, yeah, we can use my song. I said, what song? I said, what? You have a song named 5? So even that.
Everything. God speaks to me in numbers. And
I had no idea, for clarity, I had no idea that you had a song coming out titled 555. Even the title of this episode.
Yeah.
As I mentioned to you how I come up with the titles of the episode. And then to find out the connection that you had with that title.
Yes.
Is definitely ordained.
The Lord speaks to me in all kinds of ways. And because I'm also a creative, like I do integrate it into my art, you know? And so I wrote this song after I went through, because like my leaders and all of them were saying like, you're about to, like the number 5, and like I grew up knowing that the number 5 meant grace.
Okay.
In the religious, biblical, sense, it stood for grace.
Okay.
And so I'm like, grace, I get it, but seeing it in the sequence of 3, I really pay attention because I believe in the Trinity and I believe God speaks in 3s. And so when I spoke to them, they were like, well, I believe that you're about to go through a really tough transition. Change is on the way. Change is coming. And you're about to go through a huge transition where you're going to need more grace than ever, and you're going to need to extend more grace than ever.
Let me ask a question, though. You are an ordained pastor as well. So how do you take on the fact of the numbers 555, 3s, 5s? Again, as you mentioned before, many in our Christian believe that numerology is evil. Yeah. So how do you balance that?
You know what? Like right before all of this, I probably would have thought so too. Like, I mean, I grew up knowing that like the number 6 meant, the number of man, the number 7 stood for completion, the number 8 stood for new beginnings, so we, in the church world, we would use the numbers like in that regard, because we understood that God made the earth and, the world in 7 days, the Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost, the Trinity, the three. So we always knew that. But when you start seeing it in threes, I have so many Christian friends now that I talk to that have collected how many times they see 1111 or they see 222, 333, 555 and are scared to share it because they think that it might be numerology and something that might be demonic. And that's why as soon as I saw it, I went to my pastor and I'm like, I'm not going to ignore I believe God is talking to me.
So have you ever thought about the fact that many people tend to place things in a box called witchcraft because they don't understand it? They don't so because they don't understand it, it's considered...
It's demonic.
It's demonic.
Yeah. I mean, I believe that wholeheartedly, especially post that trauma, that I went through.
Let's talk a little bit. Let's back up a little bit because I know some of our viewers are like, okay, what are they talking about? Trauma, this... Yeah. Jay, let's go all the way back.
Yeah.
Okay, so where are you from?
I'm from St. Louis, Missouri.
Okay.
Right in the middle of the U.S. of A.
Okay. Born to two-parent household?
Yes.
Okay.
Born to my mom and my dad. They were married after my mom had a first marriage and got divorced. She had my sister. And then my dad and my mom got married, and they were, my dad was like an assistant pastor, and my mom was the choir director of a Church of God in Christ church in St. Louis, Missouri. Very popular Church of God in Christ church in St. Louis. And then I remember growing up there, being in the choir, the youngest little thing in the choir, because my mom was over it. And I remember by the time I was like 6 or 7, the choir pitched in so I could get a choir robe that looked like the adults. So I've always been integrated into the music scene and into what God was doing in the church. But then at the age of 8, my dad became a senior pastor. And so we had to leave that church. We were all pretty devastated. We didn't really want to leave that church. I remember it not being the greatest time of our lives of like, you would think if somebody's going to be a pastor, you're like, oh, celebrate it. We were like, we didn't really want to leave our church. I don't know. As a kid, I didn't know exactly what exactly happened in that transition. I just know that my dad was super impactful in the church that we were in. Okay. And then ended up being a pastor of his own. And I remember going to that church and us building it from the ground up and being in the hood. I was like, I'm a county girl. Like, what are we doing in the hood? And I mean, getting our cars stolen every week. I remember doing that. My dad worked a full-time job, but still would go to church. We would go to church almost 7 days a week. Church of God in Christ. We went to church every day. Single day.
So you no pants.
Yeah, no pants.
No jewelry.
No, and definitely none of this. No Jezebel.
Red at that.
Ooh, God. Jezebel. Okay. So yeah, we couldn't wear red. We always had to wear slip. We always had to wear skirts that were past our knees. And yeah, we always had, if we had skirts on, we always had to wear shorts under them. We weren't allowed to show our toes. We weren't allowed to wear cut-off shirts.
And that was normal for you?
That was very normal.
And so you mentioned to me one time before chastity, and you never thought about doing things before getting married. So you never thought about having sex before marriage and any of that. So do you think that was primarily because of the folks that you hung around, or?
I definitely believe that. I believe also because I was afraid of God.
So what did sex represent to you?
Jesus. Marriage. It just represented, and honestly, we were taught, first of all, we were taught to not date unless we were ready to date to marry. And when you had sex, it was a sign of worship to God. It wasn't something that you enjoyed per se. I never learned about the enjoyment of sex. I never really learned about sex. I just learned don't do it, So yeah, we definitely were no sex before marriage type of family and community, So
your father didn't demonize sex.
He didn't talk about it at all.
Because some people demonize sex to the point where people have a confusion about the enjoyment of sex.
We didn't talk about it all. And when we did, I just knew that my grandmother had 13 children out of wedlock. And my dad was the oldest son of all of those kids. And so he had this sense of like this paternal thing about him where he's just kind of like, not my kids. So in my mind, even though he didn't talk about it often, I still was like, I don't want to have a whole bunch of babies and then make my dad mad and make God mad and I'm going to go to hell. So in my mind, of course, it wasn't a good thing. Sex wasn't something that I was like anticipating. It was something that I'm like, oh Lord, like I don't even know what it is. We just saw people get married and then they come back and then they pregnant. It's like, oh God. Like I was just like, it wasn't something that I wanted.
Okay, so when did you start dating?
I was fast. I had a little boyfriend in 2nd grade. I didn't tell my parents and stuff about it. Like, I had a little boyfriend. I was fast. I knew I was cute. I had long hair. I was light skinned. I was like, whatever.
So you was taking all the dudes, huh?
All of them.
Okay.
All of them. And I was smart too. So I was like, come on, you. Give my lunchbox. And I was short too. I'm like, come on, bring this. Like, so I was always like a flirty girl, a girly girl, you know? And but I remember my first real like boyfriends per se would have to be probably like 6th grade or so.
6th grade.
Probably like 6th grade, yeah.
But you never had to worry about any premarital type feeling?
Not until high school. High school, yeah. We had to worry about some things because I would, go on dates.
So your father allowed you to go on dates?
Barely, child, but yes.
So then you meet who will soon become your husband, right?
I met him when I was 11. I wasn't even talking to him for real, like when we were younger, like with like 6th grade and stuff. He just got on my nerves. He just was annoying to me. But I mostly dated white boys.
Okay.
Because I went to an all-white school.
All right. I can see that.
You know what I'm saying? I'm like, Trevor, Nathan.
I can see that.
I had an identity crisis. I would only have blonde braids, blue contacts. So identity crisis.
Did you have a problem with being an African American?
I didn't have a problem with it. I was proud to be black, but I just thought that was pretty.
Okay.
Because that's what I saw. Other than hood. Because we were only at school and church.
It was one or the other.
It was extreme. Like things that I saw that were parallel to like wealth, and things that looked successful per se, were the people that I saw at school. Because my dad worked hard. He wasn't just a pastor that was just a pastor. He was a pastor that worked hard.
But you had a very challenging relationship growing up with your father.
100%.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah.
So in your household, even though he was a pastor, you struggled in your household.
100%.
So talk to me a little bit about your struggle.
Yeah, and like I mentioned earlier, my mom had a daughter before before she got married to my dad, because she was married before. But then I was my dad's firstborn. And so not only was I his firstborn, I was the creative one in the family. So when he got sent on this mission to be a pastor, I had a lot of responsibility on me. Like to now be over the music, to be like creative director. I carried the weight of the church with him. So I would always say, you Batman, I'm Robin. Like my mom would be sick and my sister and my brother would stay home with my mom, but I would be forced to go to church with my dad.
So you were like a pseudo first lady.
Yeah.
In a sense.
Yeah. Yeah, but I was a kid. And people would like blame things on me at the church. I had a lot of burden on me, on top of that being bright in school. So I skipped a couple grades because I was like a hard worker in school. And so keeping my grades up, but also carrying the burden of the church. My dad, and this isn't making an excuse for him, but this is just me as an adult now understanding him more. My dad didn't have a father figure. My dad had gone through a lot in his home with his mom and with the different people that trafficked inside and outside of their home. And I know that my dad experienced a lot of abuse, that he doesn't really talk about to this day. But my dad was very physically expressive with me.
What does that mean?
Not sexually at all, but he would hit me a lot, to the point where I remember being very, very, very afraid of my father. Very afraid of him. I don't talk about it much because my dad is still alive. Like I used to ask, like I worked for Joyce Meyer for 10 years. And I talked to her about how do you talk about, your father molesting you, so freely. You know what I mean? Because that's her whole ministry is based off of that, And she's like, it's easier for me because my dad's dead. And so for me, because I never want to not bring honor to my father, because he's still a pastor and I love him very much. But my truth is still my truth, Do you
think that he saw it as abuse at that time, or just more so just the way things were?
I think he saw it as discipline. Discipline that was, first of all, like, listen, I didn't do nothing for real. Like, I had a little mouth, like, sometimes, like, Daddy, doggone it. Like, why are you hitting me? But not enough to get what I got. Like a spanking, a tap on the leg. I understand that sometimes. But all the way up to almost adulthood, like, I would get hit. I would, get physically done in a way that I would not allow any human to do me today.
Do you feel that the church teaches that?
I feel like at the time, yes, because one of the schools, and I don't know if I've ever shared this publicly, the first school that I went to, that was a private school, was connected to that church that I was talking about at the very beginning. And they actually spanked us. Like at the school, like they would wrap the ruler.
Well, back in the day, it was you got spanked at church, at home, at school. I'm sorry.
At school we had a yard. She had a yardstick. I remember she wrapped that thing up in electrical tape and would soak it in water. And if somebody she would publicly spank. If they did wrong, and if she didn't know who did the wrong, she'd go around the room. It's like she found joy. And it was a black school, so I think about a lot of the slave mentality, that goes into that. Like a lot of that comes from generational mindsets of. I think about the fact that my great grandmother was actually a slave. Like she was actually, even when she had dementia, she would talk about the white man ravishing her. She would just go back to those moments of being afraid. She died when she was 103. And this is the woman that raised my grandma, who raised my daddy. So it's like that kind of behavior and that kind of discipline isn't far removed. And I'm sure he gave me, and again, this isn't making any excuses for it. I've just had to come to grips with it, and because I needed to find a path of forgiveness.
How did you know it was wrong?
I knew it was wrong because I didn't do nothing. I didn't do nothing. I was a good kid. I was a very
So it would just come kid. Out of...
If people would leave the church, or if he would be angry, or I don't know,
So you wouldn't even know when it's about to come on?
Not necessarily. It usually come after church. And so I just remember being like, I didn't do nothing. And I've always been an advocate for justice. So even then I'd be like, what did I do? I would want answers because I also am a people pleaser naturally. And I wanted to fix whatever wrong I did,
Is your father and your mom still married?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
A lot of times families or, someone will exhibit aggression when they may not really want to be there anymore.
Possibly.
And sometimes when they see, these are the reminders of what's stopping me from doing what I want to do.
Yeah, and I don't know if it was necessarily even the marriage or more so, I don't think my dad wanted to be a pastor.
So why do you think he did it?
I think because there's a lot of toxicity in a lot of churches in America. And I've learned that even more so being ordained and working for many of them, and so I believe, my dad never talks about it, but I believe, just in my own observation and being 42 now, I understand now that most likely, because I remember the impact that my father had on the youth ministry. I remember that impact. People would come from all over, pack that, and that was a huge church too. Back in the day, that was to have a 2,500 seater, it's that's a huge church for us in St. Louis, and to have that place packed out whenever he was preaching. I feel like that pastor was intimidated by my father, to be honest.
And that's probably one of the reasons why he had to leave.
I almost 100% could put money on it that pastor put my daddy out because of his insecurity. I've seen it done so many times now as an adult working in ministries where a pastor will get intimidated by another pastor that really just wants to uplift that ministry, and get intimidated by their impact, and instead of locking in arms and continuing to mentor, and if you would have just possibly gassed them up a little bit, they would have stayed with you forever. You probably would have had to really force them out. But I think he was intimidated and kicked my dad out, and I think that really broke my father's heart because he looked at that man as his dad. That was his dad. He didn't have no daddy. And a lot of black men go to church, and I don't know how much these days, but I know back in those days,
Well, black men don't go to church anymore.
Exactly, because they've lost faith in it. But the black men back in the day, when I was, a young girl, back in the 70s and 80s and things like that, black men would go to church to find that male figure. They really looked up to the clergy and the pastors in the churches and looked at them as role models and dads. And I really believe that my father looked at his pastor as his dad. And I think that he let him down. And I think he kicked him out. And I think that broke my dad's heart. And so because my dad is also a very prideful man, there's no way he was going to fail. It's like, because my daddy wasn't the type that was just going to be a pastor. He always worked. He worked at a country club, you know, like he was like,
He always had other.
He had a grind.
So you were a pastor's daughter, pastor's child, and then you began dating.
Yes.
Okay. And this young man, was he also pretty prominent in the church?
But the guy that I ended up
dating.
He wasn't prominent. He was bad. He was bad. His mom actually brought him to the church because his dad was incarcerated, and she got saved, like found Jesus under my dad's ministry. And so she brought her son, who was this big dude that was getting chased home because people thought he was in gangs. And so he started coming to our church to be almost like to be mentored by my father.
So how did your dad feel when he found out you were dating the young man whose father?
He hated it. He liked having him at the church because he liked, you know, like, because he loved being able to mentor young men, but he didn't want me to marry him. He didn't want me to marry no white man either. I'm like, do you not want me to get married? Because it's giving you don't want me to get married at all. Like,
so yeah, because when you came home and said, hey, I'm engaged, how did that go?
Well, when I only said yes to the engagement because he told me that he talked to my dad. So my dad had approved it.
How old were you?
I had to be, 19? And to be 19 and engaged for me, because keep in mind, I skipped a grade. I actually skipped 2 grades. My mom wouldn't let me physically skip. She just made me skip 1. I was younger than everybody in my grade. But by that point, I had already graduated. I was about to be a junior in college. And so, because I graduated when I was 17. And so everybody from my graduating class had already been married. They were already married. They only dated to marry. So people in my grade, by 19, number one, they were probably like 20. They were, you know, because they were a year older than me. But they were already like on their first or second kid.
So you felt pressure?
I didn't feel pressured. I just felt like, okay.
It's time to do it.
I guess so.
Were you in love?
I loved him. I don't know if I was in love, but I loved him because I had seen him go through so much, you know, and triumph through so much.
Why him?
He was a bad boy, and I knew my daddy didn't really like him either. And because, like I said, I helped him through a lot. Like I helped him in school, like I helped him with his homework.
But what did you know about being a wife at 19?
Probably enough. I watched my mom. They trained back in those. My mama trained me like how to clean, how to cook, how to wash. Like I felt like I was ready, but I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to get married then. I was okay being engaged, but I was a junior in college, and I didn't want to get married until after I finished grad school.
Okay, so why did you get married?
I wanted 3 years. My daddy made me.
Okay, so I'm confused. You said he didn't want you to marry him, but then he made you marry him.
Here's the thing. He didn't want me to necessarily marry him, but I'm like, didn't you tell the man yes? Didn't you tell the man I could get married to him? He was like, yes, but I didn't like it. But so his way of being like, well, since you want to be grown, then get married now. And I'm like, I don't want to get married right now. I want to wait till after I finish grad school, not just undergrad. Like I said, I was a junior in college. I was like, I still have a year and a half left in school. I want to get my bachelor's. Then I want to go back and get my master's. And so he was like, nope, you got to get married now because I don't want people thinking that y'all having sex.
So
he announced it at church without me knowing he was going to do that.
So he just wanted to own everything. Why was he afraid that people would think you were having sex if you weren't having sex?
Because his big thing he used to always say is, don't let your goods be evil spoken of. And he was like, and there's no way that you could be engaged for that long and not be having sex. I was like, but it can be. We're not living together. Like, I live on campus, and I'm not interested in being with him. And again, that was another thing. I didn't go away to school. I stayed in St. Louis, went to a university, a great school, Webster University. I went to school in St. Louis so I could go to church still every day. And I was still a cheerleader. I was cheering in college, and I was cheering for a semi-pro football team. And this was back when the Rams were in St. Louis. So I was actually on track to to audition to, try out to be a cheerleader for the Rams. Like, that's what I wanted to do, on top of getting my degree, of course. But, like, I wanted to cheer. Like, that was what I enjoyed. But he didn't care about that at all. And he was just like, no, well, since you want to be grown, then get out now. Be married now. Change your name now. And I'm like, I don't want to do that. Then he announced it at church. And then...
Do you think that if your father had not pressured you into marriage, that you would have still married him?
Probably not, because I actually would say, if we can't make it through this engagement for 3 years, how are we going to make it through a marriage?
And then you decided to move forward. You got married at 19.
Yeah.
And when you were married for how many years?
20.
And how was that marriage for you?
Honestly, it was fun. It was fun. He was my best friend. He was my homie. Like, we grew up together. Until that last couple years, when I realized that he had checked out. I didn't know he had checked out.
So for the first 15 years of the marriage, everything was perfect.
Well, I wouldn't say perfect. I like, looking in hindsight, I realized that I carried everything on my shoulders. But because I had already been doing that, I'd been trained to do that with my dad. Like,
what do you mean carrying everything on your shoulders?
Everything was in my name.
Okay.
I was the one with the good credit, so everything that we bought was in my name. Any apartment we got, any car, everything was in my name. I was the one with the degrees, so I was the primary breadwinner for the family. And so anything with finding doctors, like anything that was a responsibility, I did it all.
So what did he do for a living?
What did he do for a living? That's a good question.
Okay. No. So your dad never asked or never thought, how are you going to take care of my daughter?
He did. He asked him that, and at the time he was actually going to possibly play pro baseball. Like, he had walk-ons like for the St. Louis Cardinals, and then he hurt his knee. But then he was also in Barber College, so and he had great relationships with amazing like the hair community in St. Louis. I mean, like, top tier, where all of the athletes went to get their hair done, and so we didn't know he wasn't going to follow through with that, because he was on track. He was finishing his stuff, but he just never went to get the license for it.
So for 15 years, you allowed him to just kind of...
Allowed is a strong word, because I definitely nagged. It was like, what are you doing? So he worked at hospitals, or he'll get little... he was a phlebotomist for a little while, but it was never anything that was secure. And I'm like, are you going? I didn't want to be his mother, but I'm like, are you going to go finish your degree? Like, are you going to get your license for cutting? And, well, I'm scared to take the test. Like, it's just always a reason.
Because meanwhile, you're living this extremely successful life, career.
Yeah,
right?
I was already in the marketing field. I was working for a huge ad company. I was also ordained at the time, like, so I'd already finished all of that for schooling, finished my degrees, went back and got my master's. Like, I stayed focused on what I was doing. So yes, I was very, very successful in the world. I was handling contracts with the Cardinals, with like doing stuff for Nelly, Cedric the Entertainer, like all these huge contracts. And so I was like happy to have him. And then he was a big guy too. So he's 6'7". Then I'm only 5'1". So like, I mean, we look good together. It was a dope look.
Visually.
It was a visually appealing. But at home, I was kind of like, like, I wish you could contribute more, And so I would always encourage him and talk to him about other ways that he could, grow. But then we found that he was actually a phenomenal speaker.
Okay.
And so I was like, let's hone in on this craft. So he got ordained as well. And we really just started like building that up for him.
So did he get ordained because he was a great speaker, or because he was called by God?
I believe he felt like he was called by God. But like, because he originally went through the schooling through the church, because I didn't think he was a good speaker.
But how do you know when you're called by God?
I mean, he's definitely anointed.
But how do you know?
For me, I actually hear God audibly sometimes. Like, I'll hear like a yes. Like, it sounds like a still voice. It could sound like my voice. Like, I knew when I was called to do ministry, like, it was a knowing inside of me. I can't say what his experience exactly was, but I know that he had an encounter with God. God would deal with him quite often, on his relationship with him. And I know for me, like, I have when I want to hear him, I can. Or when he's ready for me to hear him, I can, but I can also be like, I don't want to hear you right now. Like.
I just remember the very first time, Jay, coming to the realization that everybody that's preaching has not been called by God. I remember being in college, and I went to VCU, and across the city is Virginia Union University, and they breed pastors. It's a Christian university, and to find out that when we were getting ready to graduate, many people were fielding jobs to become pastors the same way that I was fielding jobs. Yeah. And it wasn't about were you called. They were trained, and then they went who had the biggest bid. That was so foreign to me at that moment.
Oh, yeah. That's not foreign to me.
And so then I questioned, I was like, so you are choosing the path of being a pastor as a career.
Yeah.
Not that you were called.
Yeah. A lot of people are. Most pastors, I think, personally, which is one of the reasons why I started my branding and marketing consulting firm, was because I believe a lot of pastors are not in their right position. I believe in what's called the fivefold ministry. So I believe that some are pastors, some are apostles, some are teachers, some are prophets, and some are evangelists.
And some are opportunists.
And some are maybe speakers, maybe actors, maybe TV personalities, and maybe just gifted,
right.
And so
in something else.
But a lot of pastors, I believe, are not positioned properly, and I believe that they're accepting things. And that's one thing. And I bring up Joyce a lot because honestly, she was one of the people that I saw do it really, really well, where a lot of people just assume she was a pastor. And she will tell you, because what you see on TV, you see thousands and thousands of people at all of her gatherings. Well, those are her conferences. That's not a church. So if people ask her to this day, she's 80, like 82, 83, you ask her today, are you a pastor? She'll say no.
Has she ever been a pastor?
No. She said, I hire pastors. I hire qualified people that are also called to be pastors. She's like, I am a glorified Sunday school teacher. She said, I'm at best in the fivefold ministry, I'm a teacher. She's like, it's just my calling. I'm a speaker that I can teach people how to apply God's word to their everyday life the same way I did. And so I've always respected that. She was one of the first people that I think I heard be confident in that and do it successfully.
Let me ask you this. One of the things I talk about in Coinology is finding your gift. I believe God has given each and every one of us a specific gift that only I have, only you have, only Fonz has, only Kanan has, right? And many of us have learned over the years by societal norms to muffle it so we don't hear it anymore, don't see it. And many of us, once we do, because very few of us actually find out what that gift is. Many are afraid to monetize that. They feel that you should not monetize the gift of God. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, I 100% disagree with that. If you're actually doing what you're supposed to do, I believe in the scripture that says, I will, like this is from God who says it to us, I will that you prosper and be in good health, even as your soul prospers. But this comes even as your soul prospers. So his priority is that your soul prospers first. As long as your heart is aligned and you're doing what you're supposed to do with God and for God, like directly for him, I believe it is his will that we prosper. And not just prosper monetarily and financially, but he wants us to be in good health as well. Like God wants his best. When he made Adam and Eve, he put them in the richest land that he could have ever, created for them. So I don't ever think that his goal for Christians and for his children was to ever be poverty. He said you can have everything.
Everything you want.
You can have it's my joy and my pleasure to give you everything. So when people try to say that, now when we make that the focus, no, his primary focus for Adam and Eve in the garden was that they obeyed him and not ate off that one tree. He's like, that's one thing I asked you not to do. That was his first priority, and that's the one thing that got them kicked off. So his first priority was to say, just obey me, but y'all can have everything. So I don't ever think that
you have to. So you were a preacher's kid.
Yes.
went on to become the preacher's wife.
Yeah.
Right? Because your husband ended up becoming a preacher. You were a preacher as well.
Yeah.
So you and your husband were both dual. You power couple, I guess, from the outside looking in. You guys have a beautiful daughter.
Yes.
So everything looks amazing from the world on the outside. When did you notice that this dream marriage was coming unfolded?
The biggest indicator for me was after I had accepted, right after I'd done tours. Like, I'd already done tours with, like, Mary, sang all around the world with them. By this point, we had already had, like, top hits with Lecrae. Like, I'd already written major songs for them that were being played all over the world, sung all over the world, played on award shows everywhere for him and his whole camp. And so I had seen a lot of success even with music at this point.
So you were on the road more than at home.
Not more than at home. It was a nice balance, though. And a lot of it, I integrated him into that, too. Like, I made him my road manager. He didn't know what to do, but that's a lot of times what we do as women. We try to make our husband fit into our world. They don't always try to make us fit in theirs, but like we be trying to, because I was around a lot of guys and I always wanted them to know that I wasn't interested in them. Like, I'm like, I got a husband. I'm not interested in you. I'm here for business. And so a lot of times he would even travel with me when it was something that was a J thing, not when I was singing backgrounds for Mary and stuff. But if it was something with the fellas, I tried to bring my husband as much as possible, just to protect. Don't let your goods be evil spoken of. That was ingrained in my head. And so, but yeah, I was gone a lot, but I had seen a lot of success at this time with music. I'd already been offered so many record deals from like major labels. And at that point, he was really kind of showing a little bit of jealousy.
Yeah, I can imagine. Because the calls were coming in for you.
They were coming in for me, and he wanted to speak. And so I felt a little guilt, even at the prime of my career, when honestly, I believe that was right when it was supposed to take off.
How often do you think that really happens? And I know as a pastor, I'm sure you see a lot where women become extremely successful, and their biggest enemy many times is sleeping right next to them.
I think it happens often, especially now post like divorce. I hear a lot of people that come to me.
But what can we do as women? Is there something that we're doing that's breeding that jealousy?
I think who we marry in the first place.
But how would you have known? You know, everyone changes. So you marry somebody, you guys were married for 20 years.
Yeah.
So who you were 20 years prior to that is not who you are today.
But I always been Jay. I always been fabulous, and I always
traveling the world.
No.
Mary.
But I could tell that I knew that I was destined for something great, even though I didn't even think I would be in the music business. I thought I was going to be a huge like marketing PR exec. That's what I thought. Like, but I already knew then because I put the work in. And that's the thing, like, I knew I was going to be somebody.
Right.
And I already knew that I was going to be somebody in the church world because my daddy was. And, like, I was already, like, even though he had reached a certain cap in our city, people from outside of the city were reaching out to me already, even before I started making music. So I knew, and I could tell that he wanted more, but the fact I saw the signs, that man didn't finish nothing.
Right.
He didn't finish anything.
He didn't, but the biggest thing is you believed. I believed
in myself and I believed in him.
Okay.
But he gave the impression that he was believing in me. But as a woman, looking back in hindsight, I knew he didn't believe in himself. He ain't finished nothing. I should have known.
So the jealousy started to raise its
and the
ugly
fact
head.
that I wasn't in my rightful place as a woman. Like, I shouldn't. Like, I remember when that man told me at the very beginning, he was like, "I'm cool being a house husband." What? And I laughed because he was hilarious. But I laughed, but that stuck with me. This has been 25 years later. I'm like, why did I not love myself enough? Even though, I was ready to get away from my daddy, who I did not have a great relationship with, why didn't I love myself enough to just be like, no to this and no to this?
No to that. Well, it also being raised in the church and being raised as a leader in the church, I'm sure divorce was not an option.
No, it wasn't. But even when I saw his, like, the jealousy rear its head a little bit, especially when I got offered the job with Joyce Meyer, it was just like, I took that job and turned down like 5 record deals. I didn't want to necessarily take that job I was her worship pastor for her. And I'm like, I didn't want to necessarily do that. I was wanting to stay on the road. Like, my music was popping off. But he wanted to focus on his speaking. And so I was like, okay, I'll take this. I'll go back to St. Louis. I'll do that role. But the rule was we both couldn't work at the ministry at the same time. I was like, us both working at the ministry at the same time will not work. He took a job behind my back and used my name to get the job. He took a job at the church behind my back, became the youth pastor, and that's when I really knew it was like, it was a spiral down. I knew that.
How do you think you're going to be able to get away with taking a job behind your back like you're not?
He walked into a meeting, and after we had both agreed that he was not going to take it, he walked in the meeting and announced who the new youth pastor was, and it was him.
Well, I guess you have to think too. He probably wanted to provide as well, though, Jay.
I don't think that was it.
What do you think? It
wasn't no good old salary. I think he wanted that for his resume.
Okay, and so that he can build his career too, right?
It was more to build his career. It wasn't to provide per se.
Okay, so at that point, it wasn't clout. It was more so the betrayal or the deceit.
It was, because I'm like, we supposed to be rocking in this together. If you were going to take a job at a church, sir, I could have taken these record deals. I didn't want to work at a church. I only did that because we had agreed that he would focus on his itinerant speaking. We would focus on him speaking at different ministries, going around the world, doing more evangelism work that he said that he was passionate about. Okay, well, I got a job, and you can focus completely on that.
So was the jealousy the reason for the divorce?
I think it was, he didn't really have any, well, he did have things to be jealous of, let's just say. But I think what really was the cause of the divorce was once I put my foot down. Once he betrayed me with that, and didn't tell me that he took the job, I said, well, I can't keep, because I was carrying his brand, rebuilding his website, doing like press releases, all that stuff to like get the word out for him. And I said, I can't carry all this and do all of the other stuff
So
too.
You were able to walk away from a 20-year marriage because of that?
I didn't walk away from it.
Okay, what
happened? At that point, I put my foot down. Then he got another assistant.
Okay, so now let's get to, so he got an assistant.
Yeah.
Okay, so the assistant was a what?
My homegirl who was married to my bass player.
Okay, so he got a new assistant who was your homegirl who was married to your bass player. So how did having a new assistant get in the way?
Because he started sleeping with her.
With your friend?
With my friend. I didn't know, but yeah. So I could just tell things were weird. I remember because she started assisting him with the youth too at the church. And I remember she was working on a praise dance, and my daughter walked in because her and her husband were having some issues, and me and my husband at the time, we were helping them walk through some things. And I remember my daughter being like, I don't like how she look at him. And I said, I don't either, baby. So I went over to my ex, because she had called him over because one of the kids weren't there to be in the little play or whatever. She was like, come here real quick and do this role. And he just jumped up and did it. I'm like, I ain't like that. So I went over, I was like, just be careful around her. You know, I was like, be careful. And I remember that little moment, the interaction. I'm like, something ain't right. I never thought that my ex was, because he would swear up and down that cheating was not a thing. He was like, cheating is for chumps, cheating is for lose. Like, like, if I'm going to walk away, I'm going to just walk away. I'm going to stand 10 toes and tell you, like, this ain't going to work.
So you were being a little naive.
I wasn't even just being naive. I was also saying, like, but if we ain't rocking together, we've been knowing each other since we were 11.
Right.
You know, like, you could still be my home, but we ain't got to end it on being unfaithful. Like, we can just be real about it.
So you were under the assumption that he definitely would never.
Because I brought divorce to him. I was like, if we want to break ties, we can. And he said never. He said never. Okay. And so when he said never, I was like, well, okay. But then I still was side-eyeing. And so then, like, it got to a point, because at that point I had, eventually I had stopped. This was like in 2017. I had to have a hysterectomy. I had a tough pregnancy with my daughter. And then I ended up having a lot of fibroids and things like that. My mom had, it goes, our family just really struggled with that. So he talked me into having a hysterectomy because he said, we had a couple of miscarriages. So he's like, we're not going to try that no more and be hard on your body. First he was going to get a vasectomy. Then he was like, no, well then go ahead and get the hysterectomy.
So you had a hysterectomy in the early 30s.
In 2017. So took it all, and I remember being very devastated by that. And but that's when a lot of the stuff was going on that was weird, because he went out of the country. I couldn't even walk yet. I'm like, and I found out that she was going out of the country with him. I didn't know that until afterwards. And so I said, okay.
So how was your relationship with her? Did you notice a change in her.
Yeah, I remember one time this girl, speaking of demonic, that girl said some stuff to me. She used to pray, and she was around my daughter a lot. That girl gonna say to me, one time she said, "Jay, sometimes I pray for you and I put a blanket over my head." I said, I don't like that. I don't like you praying for me under a blanket. I said, I don't think I like that, sis. What's that? Well, what do you mean? She snapped.
You said, do you watch TikTok?
Yeah.
I can't remember this lady's name, but you know what I'm talking about? She's a prophet on TikTok, and she does all of her prophecies with a blanket on her head.
It might be her, girl. I don't know.
Well, so what's the deal with this blanket? I thought it was supposed to protect you.
I think that's what she was trying to say, but I said it felt like a nasty spirit on her. I said when she said it to me, nothing about it made me feel the Holy Ghost. It made me feel creepy.
Have you, one of the things that I had to come to grips with was that some of the biggest witches reside in the church.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. And it ain't like we think of spells, we thinking of like thinking of like stirring in a pot. No, people praying over your stuff. People, praying for your mates. People praying on your people. And it could be the smallest things, like praying over like your business or your employees, speaking negatively about people. That's witchcraft. Like, it's not always like a spell or a voodoo doll. It's sometimes just harsh words that causes people to have bickering behind, pitting. I see this in a lot of churches, people pitting people against each other, telling them both to do the same thing and not telling them both that they're doing the same thing, and then they end up getting mad at each other when
that's witchcraft.
That's witchcraft. That's demonic. I see it a lot in leadership. It's demonic. It's terrible. And so like it's not always just like a person in looking like me, basically. It's not like it's not somebody in like black lace with a pointy nose per se. It's just, it could be a leader. It could be the lady across the street. It could be one of your best friends that's praying, that sees what she thinks could be a good marriage and want that for herself, and not necessarily enter into it initially saying, I'm going to take her husband, but admiring our relationship so much and admiring who this person has been on the stage and the platform, not realizing that who you are on the stage and platform. I knew this a long time ago because I grew up in a family with a pastor, so it's like who you see on the platform is not who you get on the regular basis. And so I could see that being glorified and her wanting that. But that didn't turn out very well for her either. So
she ended up, their relationship continued.
Yeah.
And then one day, how did the marriage come to an end? Did he come home and say, Jay, I'm in love?
Yeah, when I first found out, I went on a 20-day fast. Like, I can get real spiritual real fast. Like, if I really want, that's what I said. When I want to hear God, I can hear him. When he want me to hear him, I can hear him. When I don't want to hear him, he give me some time, But like when I wanted to hear him, I was like, I'm going on a 20-day fast. So I was just drinking water. I just like, I got to hear you because I can't go into 2020 feeling so like everything was with these churches that I was helping was talking about 2020 clarity. And I'm like, all these churches with they little catchy sayings, 2020 clarity, 2020, couldn't nobody see COVID coming, but we got 2020 clarity on all the pastors' flyers, it's like, and so I was like, I can't walk into this 2020 clarity situation and come up with anything creative when everything in my life seems blurry. And so I went on a 20-day fast.
You thought at that moment you were going to save your marriage?
I thought I didn't know it was my marriage that was the problem. I didn't know. It was when I did that fast, God showed me a vision on my car where it was some text messages. I saw his name and her name, pulled over, called her husband, and said, hey, look, I just got this vision on my windshield.
Wow. So you got a vision on your windshield?
On my windshield.
You had not actually found the text messages?
No.
Okay, and you called her husband off of a vision?
On a windshield. It was blue and white bubbles that I saw his name and her name. I didn't see the text on there, and I'm sitting at the light.
So... the vision had an iPhone.
It was an iPhone.
It was
blue and white. It wasn't green. It wasn't no Android.
Right. It wasn't an Android. So then you call her husband.
I said, God, what am I supposed to do with this? He was like, call her husband. And I called him, and he denied it several times. He denied it. He was like, I don't know what you're talking about. I was like, do you know anything about some text between them? He was like, I don't know what you're talking about.
So you really could have ruined a marriage.
But then they found out, no, he said, then finally he was like, let me hang up and call you. Like, let me take a break and call you. So he took off work and broke it down. It was like, in 2018, I had caught them texting inappropriately.
So why did he lie to you at first?
Because he had an indiscretion in their marriage.
Okay.
And he thought that was something that was going to level the playing field.
Okay.
And I was like, well, why didn't you tell me? He's like, Jay, I wasn't finna break your heart. That was his job, and he promised me he was going to tell you. I was like, well, why didn't you give him a time limit at least to say, after 30 days, 2 weeks, I'm going to tell her that's my homegirl. Like, and I was in the dark. So they had a whole meeting, the three of them.
And
my ex-husband, his wife, and him. And he basically was like, leave my wife alone. And then he told her, like, because they had sworn that they didn't do anything sexually. So it was like, because his situation wasn't sexual. It was more like just emotional. He's like, you see how easy this can happen. So he's like, now can we start really working on our marriage for real?
So because cheating begins when? Is it when the sex happens, or is it the thought?
I think it's the thought, honestly. I think cheating, once you start thinking about whether it's be sexual or emotional, I think the thought of it, like even the Bible talks about it. Like once you've thought about, having sex with a woman, a man's wife or whatever, you've already done it, know? So I think it starts with the thought. But for me, I would have preferred it just be like sex, honestly. Like an emotional connection. And so I ended up asking him after that call, I was like, can I see the text messages? Like he was like, I can't send you all of them, sis. He's like, it'll kill you. And I was like, send me something that'll prove, because I had been asking my ex-husband all this time, like, do you have feelings for her? Like, what's going on? Something ain't right. And he was denying it, making it feel like, oh, you done got big, like you done got picked up some weight, or you're insecure, or this and this. Like, it's because of the hysterectomy, your hormones. He kept gaslighting me, making me feel like it was me. And then when my homeboy sent me the text message, I was sick already. It was just like, good morning, beautiful. Good morning, baby. I love you. Love you. Can't wait to see you tomorrow.
So it wasn't the sex that killed you. It was the fact that he was in love with her.
It was both. But it started with the love part. Like, it made me sick. And the idea of him having sex with another woman made me throw up. Because I had only been with him at this point. I had only been with him for all my life. Like, that's all I knew. To be like, have you had sex with me since you had sex with her? Is she inside of me? Am I a lesbian? I didn't know what was going on. I was sick.
You were confused.
I was just lost. I felt like, and ever since when I sent him those messages, he shut down after that. I never got an explanation. I never got nothing. He just kind of shut down. So for a minute there, he promised me that it wasn't sexual at all. And then God showed me in a dream of him turning his phone off and opening up his laptop and dragging things to the trash. And then so I actually was able to get his phone, and I looked in the trash. Be careful what you look for, because you're going to find it. If you feel it, it's probably already happening. And they had that confirmation. It killed me to see in the trash, hey, baby, I'm here. Okay, the door's open. In the trash. It was like the week before. Oh, you was just at her house. Like, oh, so y'all definitely smashing.
So many marriages survive infidelity. Why did your marriage not survive it?
He didn't want it. I was willing to make it work.
So at that point, even after you saw the messages, you were heartbroken. You were frustrated.
Yeah.
You were willing to still fight for your marriage.
Yeah, because I knew that I brought my childhood trauma from my dad in church.
Or were you worried about what the church would think?
I didn't give a crap about what church had to say.
You just wanted to save your marriage.
I loved my family. I loved the little unit that we had made. And I talked about this on, I was a co-host on Erica Campbell's show this morning, and I talked about being in love with the fantasy versus the reality. I realized I was more in love with the fantasy of what I thought and what I believed he could become and what I believed we were.
And you were used to him.
I mean, that was comfortable. And I didn't want to have sex with nobody else.
Right.
The thought of having sex with somebody made me nauseous. Like, I literally just threw up at the thought of it.
Did you ever approach her and say, leave my husband alone?
Nah, I ain't never finna be like that, because I'm a female that was like, I did tell her, like, I called her, I was like, and she was like, you crazy. Like, she just made it seem like it was me too. And she shut me down, and then she would like block me, so I didn't really see her much after that. So
after that, you never had a conversation with her?
She never, nobody ever gave me a conversation. Like, my ex-husband never really gave me a conversation. I only saw her one time, and I just saw her on the road, and I followed her, because I just wanted to look at her. And I remember she got scared, tried to video me acting like I was crazy. I'm like, you slept with my husband. Like, I'm like, what are you talking about? And then she put a restraining order on me. I remember that, because she got scared that I didn't ram her car or anything. I just felt like, where is the respect? Nobody's gonna give me a call. Nobody's gonna give me a talk. Like,
so he just came home one day and said, I'm leaving, Jay.
I came back home from being out of town, basically Valentine's Day, and his bags were packed. He had traded my car in, forged my signature, got him another car, and said he was leaving. And then I'm still thinking we gonna stay married. And then months after that, I got served with papers with her handwriting on it.
So he left you. And you had to pick up the pieces, right?
Yeah. I mean, my daughter was still in school, and this was right around the pandemic. So she was virtually in school. Yeah.
So, and then how long before he moved on with his life? How long did it take?
I mean, he was with her for about he moved to Florida for a little while, lied about getting a job, got a job using, never mind. But yes, he was with her with that. And then later on, I found out that this man was with a whole nother woman.
Okay, so he was involved with another woman while he was still with her.
Yeah.
So he's not with her anymore.
No.
Okay, so he left her.
Yeah.
Did she ever try to come back? And
no, she started a ministry for broken women.
Wow. Wow.
My God.
Well, you know what I find? A lot of these folks that are supposed to be coaches and
you better do your fact checking, y'all.
Yeah, you better.
Women, I said it because I never say her name because she don't deserve that. She don't deserve me giving her no clout. She knows who she is.
Would people know who she is?
No.
Okay.
But I know who she is, and she don't. I don't even want her to hear me say her name because her name is a non-factor to me. But I still like when I saw that she had a ministry for broken women. What? You would still be with him today if he didn't cheat on you.
Right.
With somebody he found on Instagram.
And then he ends up marrying someone else.
Yeah, I found out they were on a very popular podcast while we were still married. Before, like right after I got served.
So you were still married and he was on a podcast with
the other one.
Your friend or the other?
The other one.
So, okay. So he really was cheating on. He had.
Baby, the thing was about their Instagram love.
Right.
The episode was called IG Love.
So he was bold.
Bold.
So he went on a podcast with not his girlfriend, but his girlfriend.
Girlfriend.
About Instagram love.
On a very popular podcast.
Still married to you.
Very much so married to me. And I'm still standing on God's word, having people pray that we going to get, I had no idea. People start sending me that link. I said, oh, he done for real.
Humiliation.
Oh, devastated.
Yeah.
Devastated.
And so everyone knew in the church because you guys have become very popular in the church. So he also wanted to, I guess that was his stamp of saying, I'm done.
Oh, yeah. He was definitely upset, too, because I was also on the Joyce Meyer podcast. I was the co-host of her podcast, which had over 15 million subscribers.
Well, had you already embarrassed him on the podcast?
I mean, the whole thing about the podcast was to talk about our everyday life. It was taking Joyce's sermons and applying it to our life. And I was talking about the fact that, our family was going through some issues. And I didn't go into detail, but he just knew that that we were going to talk about what I was going, because I don't know how I could have even done the podcast without being honest about it. Because I'm like, I was devastated. What's wrong, Jay? Nothing.
So you understand when you see the Avatar Grays.
Oh, yes.
And the other women who suffer.
Yes.
Public humiliation.
Yes.
And infidelity in front of the world in church.
Oh, 100%.
And so you also understand why many of them choose not to leave.
Yeah, because it's hard to rebuild. And I realized that so many of these women, especially and it's unfortunate in the Christian world, when they're the ones that get cheated on, they end up fading to black. You never hear of them again. And people celebrate the resurrection of the relationships that the husband had ruined the marriage. It's like, what?
The husbands get a whole new rebirth.
A whole new life. And the ladies faded to black.
Like Juanita Bynum.
Yes.
It's for some reason the world is still mad at her. Why are they mad at her when she was the one who was beat?
Yes, she was yes, she was treated unfairly, and she's the one that gets demonized. I think of a lot of women.
Yeah, so what is it in the church with women and us being demonized?
I think you're either demonized when you refuse to stay quiet. Once you actually speak up against it, because people want you. I remember so many people telling me, like, just move on, like, let it go. That's 20 years of my life. That was my virginity, my only child, my whole life. I've only been divorced, even to this day. I was married for 20 years. I've only been divorced 3 years. So you really haven't processed all of this. I mean, I think I have, thankfully, because I've done a lot of therapy and because I was able to be on a podcast platform and because I am a public figure, I'm able to speak about it regularly.
Does it still hurt?
At times.
Do you miss him?
I miss what I thought we were.
Have you seen him?
Yeah. Not often. But I saw him, like, when our daughter graduated. I haven't seen him since he got remarried. Because he's remarried and started a church and everything. Daughter goes to his church and everything.
Your daughter goes to his church.
That's what hurts.
So your daughter has, so help me understand, it hurts because she goes to his church.
Yeah.
But do you feel as if she should have chosen a side?
I feel like she chose a side.
Why do you feel that?
She walked in the wedding.
What would you have preferred for her to do?
I would have loved her to probably stay neutral.
But what does neutral look like? Not go to her father's wedding?
I didn't say don't go.
But just don't walk.
Walking in it, in the pictures with it, like living with them, like it's a lot.
When have you last spoken to your daughter?
I talked to her this week.
Did you ever tell her?
She knows.
But did you tell her?
Yeah, I told her. But a lot of it at the beginning, because she was just, I know that my daughter said this. She said, Mom, all of this has been hard on me. And watching you process it out loud was hard as well. Now, my ex, he don't talk about nothing. So that's easier for her. She's a lot like him in that regard. I'm very expressive. I've always been very expressive. She said now, even though it's just 3 years later, she's like, I finally feel like I'm thawing out. She was like, I'm 21 now, and I feel like I'm finally thawing out. Like, all this time, I feel like I've been frozen.
And you got to keep in mind, she's 21 years old. So she hasn't experienced what you've experienced.
She hasn't at all. Her brain isn't even fully developed.
So once she becomes a mother and a wife and so forth, she could probably look back on it and
I know she will.
Oh, my God, I now understand what my mom went through.
I know my baby loves me. And I've taken a lot of that on myself, too, because I raised my child to love her father unconditionally, because I wanted her to have a relationship with her daddy that I didn't have with mine. So I raised her to love him like that. And I never thought that it would backfire and slap me in my ass. Like I never thought that. But I definitely raised her to love him unconditionally. So to me, then I've pivoted my thought process, and it still stings. Seeing them in family photos together, seeing them in the wedding photos together. Like, I didn't go looking. I blocked all of it, but people would send things to me. And
that's the question I wonder. Why do people send stuff?
I don't know, man.
I mean, I don't know why people feel like you need to know or you need to see.
I had to do lives to tell people, don't send me nothing.
So the question is, did some people send it because they wanted you to be in pain?
I think some people just were, I think a lot of people were in disbelief. People called me crying because me and my ex-husband, we had a ministry together, like that was outside of the other churches. Like we had a movement going, like where hundreds and hundreds of people would come to our events to get healed, to get delivered, like all that stuff. Like,
so
we had a movement.
You're laying hands on people, and suffering at home, and so this is something that you see a lot in the church, where people spend more time on delivering other people. Meanwhile, at home, their house is a complete travesty.
And I mean, and once I really got the confirmation that was what was going on, I deaded all that. Because I just knew something was off. Once I found out it was really off, and it was confirmed. Oh, no. I ain't pointing to nobody. I ain't bleeding on nobody. Like, I quit all the ministries. Girl, I went into straight up therapy mode because I saw my family bleed on other people when they were going through things. And I've slightly bled on people, but not at this extent. So I shut down. And that was something that was also hard for my daughter to see, because I was like, I ain't finna be nobody's pastor. I need a pastor. And that's why I was disappointed, because wasn't none of my pastors being pastors. I was like, help me.
What were they doing?
Wanting me to keep working.
So it was about the work.
Yes.
It wasn't about how can I heal Jay's heart and her soul.
They said, if you find a therapist, we'll reimburse you for it. What? And I'm on the executive staff of a church. What do you mean? That's all. That's literally all they had. And so I'm like, I was disappointed. So I had to take a break from church. I was disappointed because I know that's not the ministry I do. I'm a hands-on type of person. Anybody that knows, anybody that's ever been mentored by me, anybody that's ever been stewarded by me, pastored by me, and I don't even deem myself as a pastor.
So you understand when people talk about church hurt.
Oh, 100. I've always known, but I know it at a different level now, to the point that I never thought that I wouldn't go to church consecutively. I don't trust church right now.
No, you don't trust church.
Currently.
What is it about church that you do not trust?
The pomp and circumstance of it all right now. In
so,
westernized church right now.
Okay. So
not God, not Jesus. I'm still a believer. I love the Lord. I still believe in the Holy Spirit. I'm still a blood-bought believer. But I know the business that goes on behind the scenes of church right now. And for me, until I can afford to really do church the way I believe God wants us to do church, because honestly, I am the church. In the Bible that I read, my Jesus spent more time with the people than in the four walls of the church. When he was in the four walls of the church, he's flipping tables over. And I'm not in the... I don't really feel like I should be going to churches flipping them over, but that's kind of what I do when I go in on. I'd be like,
so let me ask you this. So I know just a few years ago, Creflo Dollar came under a huge attack when he spoke out against the methodology of tithing. He mentioned that he was a part of spreading this prosperity messaging. What are your thoughts on that?
On prosperity or tithing?
Well, just first let's start with the tithing and him coming under such an attack by the church. The church wanted to shut him up because he was saying that the way that we've been taught about tithing was incorrect.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
I can only speak on my personal thoughts on tithing now. I remember being raised to think that every part of anything that I ever earned was supposed to be 10% given to the church. And this is even, my daddy made me give tithe on my student loans.
Okay.
That I now pay back. So that was, you know what I'm saying? I had to pay tithes on the full student loan to the church. And I'm like, what in the world is that about? That's dumb.
Well, it's the lifestyle. I guess it's the principle of give back. So if you got to give back, it's just teaching you to give back.
But
right?
now as you know, as someone that's honestly not really affiliated with any specific church per se, I do sing and lead worship at several churches that I can align with, but I don't consider myself a member of a church right now. Anything that I believe that can give to the orphans and the widows, which is I believe our messaging, our command from the Lord is to give to the orphans and the widows. Anything that helps people that are impoverished, that are doing things that any organization that's really uplifting the kingdom of God, I don't mind it. It doesn't have to be a church for me. That's one reason why some of the organizations I give to, there aren't churches. It's I'll give 10% of my earnings to something like that. And I don't do it all the time. And a lot of times I'll tuck off 10% of my stuff so that I can have money to get a homeless man and not care if he's going to buy cigarettes or not. It's not my role to care about that.
You give it.
Yeah, I gave it already.
Right.
So like right now, since I'm not really affiliated with a church for real, I don't have to give to the four walls of the church right now. I'll like I said, I'll go to the store, I'll buy peanut butter crackers in my car right now. I'll have blankets, peanut butter crackers, some water. So if I need to pull over and give somebody some stuff, I'll have 10% of that because I believe 10% of my earnings need to go towards blessing those that are in need or helping to build some type of nonprofit organization that's actually doing the work of the kingdom. So
you don't believe that as a believer that you need to attend a church every Sunday?
Not anymore.
So what shifted? Why do you feel that is different now?
Once I realized brunch existed on Sunday. No, I'm just playing. This is what people do on Sundays? No, that's not what it is though. But seriously though, my relationship with God, once I made that, here's the thing, COVID really did it. Once I realized that once COVID really pulled us away from the church, because I was in the rat race of the church world, where I was in church 7 days a week, and I really would leave depleted. And I as a mom, I never wanted that for my daughter, and so I taught her and raised her differently than I was raised, where I didn't make her go all the time because I'm like, your schooling is important. Our family time is important. Things like that. Eating dinner at a regular time is important, And so even though I missed the mark on some of that, I do believe that now, post-divorce, post-pandemic, my relationship with God is a lot stronger. I feel more seen, known, and heard from Him than I ever did when I was performing for Him. Everything that I did before was performance-based. And when I think of the cross, you think of it one way is this way and the other way is this way. I did everything from this way of the cross. I did it for acceptance, for approval, for love. When in all honesty, as a blood-bought believer, I'm supposed to do everything propelled from the cross. I'm supposed to do it from acceptance, from approval. And so now that I've had that extreme pivot, it's not my works that caused me to be his daughter. It's not what I do for him that caused me to be his daughter. And that's where I was before, when I was in that religious mindset of I have to be there at this time, I have to do this, I have to go to Sunday school, I have to teach this, I have to do this, I have to do this.
The perfection.
The perfectionism, the performance. And there's a story in the Bible of Mary and Martha when they were preparing for Jesus to come. And Martha was cleaning up, cooking, doing all the things, preparing the stuff for Jesus. Well, Mary, with her little hippie, free-for-all self, when she saw Jesus come, she stopped doing everything and sat at his feet. Martha was mad. It was like, get up, we not done. Food ain't done. House still dirty. Did you clean the bathroom? Jesus was like, she doing the right thing. She's sitting at my feet. You still working. I've always been a Martha. I've always been the person that was behind the scenes preparing the messages, making sure the Jumbotron doesn't have too many bulbs popped on it. Like I've gotten offered major $500,000 basically to work at churches, to be their creative director, to be their creative pastor, even post-divorce, and I've turned it down because I don't want to be in that mindset of performance again. I don't want to do that. I'll do it for the Grammys or the Stellar Awards, but I don't really want to do that for a church right now.
You know, the thing that I think is so sad is that many of our children won't know what the church meant to so many families as it did in the past. But what I will say is, as we look at churches today, many times you have to ask yourself, what's the difference between the church and going to the club? You go in, they've changed the church, and it looks a lot like a club. Strobe lights all over. The pulpit is no longer traditional. The music has to have a certain amount of bass into it. You have to akin the songs to what's hot in hip-hop. Some of even the praise dancing sometimes can be questionable in nature.
TikTok dances.
Right. And they say we have to do all of this to attract the Gen Zs and the ones that come after the Gen Zs. So my question is, we're supposed to be a peculiar people. We're supposed to be different. Where are we going?
I am a proponent of evolving with the time. Honestly, because I'm also a creative and I make music, and I know that the music back in the day when I was growing up, that now is deemed as the traditional music, was also inspired by hip-hop, R&B, blues back in the day. You know what I'm saying? It was inspired by the Supremes. It was inspired by the Temptations. It was inspired, so a lot of stuff that, oh, happy day, like that wasn't what they were singing back, so that in that time was equivalent to, Kirk Franklin now. You know what I mean? So I'm all with evolving with the time to speak the language of the culture, because I'm also a person that, even on a mission field, how dare you go to Honduras and not speak the language? How dare you go to a mission field in Africa and not speak the dialect of the people that you're going to communicate? I believe as a worship leader and a pastor and a minister of the gospel, that I need to know the language of the people that I'm called to if I'm going to actually effectively bring about change. And so I'm all for evolving with the time, with keeping the main thing the main thing. I don't care.
But that's the question. Are we keeping the main thing the main thing?
No, I don't think that we are all the time. I don't mind a dance as long as it's not provocative. I don't mind the LED walls, because that is something that's going to grab. I walked in your studio and noticed your wall and your branding, and that sets a certain level of expectation for the quality of this interview and this conversation. You know what I mean? So I believe that the same needs to be done with the church. So that's what I get brought in a lot for these churches to consult on, making sure that the presentation is appealing to some. If I bring my cousin that just went to Magic City last night to the church, I want them to still be like, oh, this is kind of dope. But the message, that's on the pastor for real. That's on the pastor. What are you preaching? Like, what are you talking about? That's going to compel them to change their heart. All this stuff these are all tools to get them to the cross. Let us get them to the cross through the means of music, through all of the senses, sight, sound, smell, all that stuff. But you hook them with them. That's your job, pastor. That's your job, shepherd. I'm not the shepherd. The shepherd is supposed to guide the sheep, but a lot of these shepherds aren't really shepherds. They're not, they don't smell like sheep. They smell like baccarat. You know what I'm saying? Like, so I believe a shepherd should smell like the people. Pastors are going out the back door. They don't want to kick it with the people in the front. Like, long gone are the days where the pastor stands out in the front and shakes hands.
And shakes everybody's hand.
They don't do that no more because they out in the back. They headed to Houston. Like they got reservations somewhere, somewhere else at the Americana. They ain't got time to shake no hands because they going to fraternize with the other pastors that walked out the back door. And so and this ain't no shame. I'm not going off. But this is just my experience where it's like we get enamored, or we get I don't know, we look at the packaging of it all. I think branding is great. There are some amazing churches that have amazing branding. I think the younger pastors are doing a good job. Wear your hair in your braids. I think that's dope. That's gonna help Buki and them come to church. Like, wear your jacket that looks like a little sports jacket, and wear your jeans and your Jordans. Like, do that.
I remember when Kirk Franklin came on the scene.
Yeah.
And he was a disruptor. I mean, you talking about angry people behind Kirk Franklin. Then came Ty Tibbet, and then, on and on, and now we have Jay disrupting the scene. Right? So what's next for you, Jay?
Well, I mean, you can just see with how I started my first album out in 2011. I came out with an album called Culture Shock. Like, I knew that I was a disruptor. And part of Kirk Franklin's disruption was with my family. All of my family are God's property. So the people that made the song Stump. So that's my aunts, my uncles.
So your aunts them sued him. They ain't get all that money from Kirk, right? Because that's why, from what I hear in the street, that's why Kirk keeps changing the names of the... Okay. All right.
They hugged, though, at the Stellas. So.
Okay. They must have got their... Did they get their payout?
I don't know about the ins and outs of their business dealings.
All right.
But I do know that they're on better terms now.
Okay. I will say this to Brother Kirk, too. It was brilliant when he did his documentary on YouTube. I'm talking about his team, his marketing team, his creative director, his publicist. Shout out to Kirk Franklin's team. You guys did it with that. Even though this was like over a year ago, but I just remember thinking they did a fantastic marketing campaign, and I studied that.
Yeah, it was beautiful.
They did an excellent job.
It was beautifully done, and I think that's why Kirk has stayed so relevant, because he remains transparent and honest about his adversities. He is honest about his struggles with God, his struggles with humanity, his struggles with, and I think that's what...
His struggle with his children.
His struggles with his children, and even with his music. Almost every one of Kirk's hits has a sample of a very popular R&B song. Like, there's a reason why it feels familiar. It is! He has a method to it, and I think it's brilliant, kind of like what a Pharrell Williams does.
He's like the Diddy
he is
of gospel. And I know that's probably not a good thing to say right now, but, Diddy, that's one of the reasons that was the model he used.
Yeah, and that's
taking familiar music
and making a new hit over it. And I think that's what Kirk has done. And so I love that about him. And so I listen to Kirk a lot. Kirk was one of the first ones, like, back in the day to really, like, say, Jay, no, you got next. Like, you got next. Now, that next has taken a very long periodically time, but I believe that the next is here now. So, like we said at the very beginning, I just released a remix of my song 555. And like I said, that song had everything to do with right before that the divorce happened. I started getting awakened at 5:55 and all that stuff. And when I knew that God was about to bring some change, I didn't know it was going to be that. I refused to make a song, though, after all of this that sounded sad. I didn't want to make a sad song. I wanted to make something that felt like a vibe, a bop. So, like, that's why I didn't even leave my hometown of St. Louis until I felt better about where I used to have, like, this is a saying that says, go and laugh in the places that you once cried in. Until I could laugh in a lot of the places that my ex and I had memories in, because I used to be triggered by all of that. Like, I couldn't go to certain restaurants. I remember, this is where we did this and this where we did everything in St. Louis together. And so I was able to really do that. And so I wanted to make 555, and now I did the remix, and I partnered with Story and Story Collective, Rethink, and Capital CMG to put that out. I have another song that I'm releasing with them as well. I'm probably going to do a name change. My publicist constantly calls me by my maiden name, so I think I'm finna be going by Javon. Maybe by the time this comes out.
I know. I wonder who that could be, right?
I'm like, I guess my name is not going to be just Jay. It's going to be Javon. So I'll be coming out with that soon.
Okay.
And then coming out with more music, and then I'll be doing a full-length album. And we'll see where it goes, because my music is not just made for the four walls of the church. I think that's why I'm in this season of not just being stuck in the four walls. I'm able to really see what people want and need. When I was in that very sheltered bubble of only being experienced and exposed to church, I spoke like a church person. Mm-hmm. I didn't understand why my cousins didn't understand me, because I'm like, I'm speaking English like I was. But I spoke like a church person with this over optimistic, unrealistic, over spiritual, blah, 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 blah. Like, I think about what I used to say to them, and I'm like, dang, girl, no wonder they didn't want to roll with you to church. No wonder they didn't want to come to none of your concerts, because you was corny as hell, and you were, like, very judgmental. Mm-hmm. And so now that I've had this real life experience, I can't do nothing but thank my ex-husband for propelling me into this new level of who I am, because now what he thought is seriously what the enemy meant for evil, God already intended it for my good. Mm-hmm. Now I will reach millions of people because I speak the language. I'm able to speak a language of pain and a language of resilience that I never was able to speak before. And so for that, I say thank you.
Yeah, the pain is where you find your purpose.
Yeah.
And people want to run from it, and I understand, because it hurts.
It hurts.
But when you get to the part where you said, well, if you saw your ex-husband, you would thank him, that is where you know you've healed. Mm-hmm. Because the people who've provided the most pain to me, I would hug them now and say, thank you.
Thank you.
Because I would have never had the life had I not gone through that.
And whoever my next husband is about to be, he's about to be so blessed, and he's going to be so fine and so wealthy. It's just going to be so great. So thank you. The best sexual experience I've ever had.
Right, everything.
Like, everything is just about to be so, I would have never even allowed myself to think like this had it not been. So I do say thank you, and I honestly bless him and his wife.
The other thing, too, Jay, I'll say this in closing. What I've learned in my years of living is that there is a thing called ministry of goodbye.
Yeah.
And sometimes we have to understand, all the time, there is a blessing in goodbye.
There is.
And the seasons come and they go.
Yeah.
And your season was up. He served his time, and now it's time to move on.
Yeah, and I honestly have clean hands with it. And that was one of the things that I prayed with God, is like, I didn't serve him with papers because I didn't feel called to, because I knew that what God had shown me that we were going to do in the world together as a couple, I didn't want the blood of that on my hands. I didn't want to be responsible. I wanted to be able to sit here, even though to my ego and to my bad beatness, where I wanted to be like, no, I left him. Like, everything in me wanted to be that woman. But I feel better with my God knowing that the purpose that he called for us to have, that the blood of that dying is on his hands. I ain't got nothing to do with that. I fought for our marriage, and now that it's over, I'm glad it's over, because I didn't want to be a pastor's wife. I didn't want to do that. Like, I already lived that life. I didn't want to be a pastor of a church. Like, and that's what they have right now. And so I'm grateful. I'm super grateful for where I am. So do I miss what I thought it was? Yeah, I do. At times, but I am living my life like it's golden. Like, I love where I live. I love being in Atlanta. I love working on all the things that I'm working on, my book, my keynote speaking, working with my clients, and actually even phasing into like just really stepping into being somebody that needs a Robin in this season. I've been so comfortable being Robin to a Batman, that I'm being more comfortable stepping into that. Like, and God is allowing me to be selfish in this season, and it's been really, really, really fun and rewarding.
Well, I'm excited about seeing what's next with you, Jay. Thank you so much for coming in, and thank you guys for tuning in to Coinology.
Get the book. It's on my website, ChanelKennard.com. The 5th time is a charm.
Thank you, guys. See you next time. Welcome to Coinology, the podcast.
You ain't getting no money if you constantly worried about what everybody else got to say. If you constantly got your eyes on what everybody else doing, you ain't getting no money. When it comes down to comes the deal, I get it done. Every single one.
Welcome to Coinology, the podcast.